All right, there it is. So I'm going to go live, record. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Cloudify is here to present to the Programmability and Automation Meetup group on empowering development teams with self-service cloud environments. So with that, I will turn it over.
Lost Nick's audio there. Maybe he's still having internet problems. So we'll just carry forward. My name is Jason Hammond, and I am Director of Cloud Solutions at Cloudify. And with me today is Anthony Critelli, who's Senior Solutions Architect at Cloudify. And as Nick mentioned, we're going to be presenting on the topic of empowering development teams with self-service cloud environments. Well, first of all, I want to thank WWT for hosting us and for the Programmability and Automation Meetup groups for participating and giving us this opportunity. We definitely want to make as many connections as we possibly can and just make people aware of the solution that we provide that supports DevOps teams and Cloud Ops teams in improving how it is that they deliver service to development teams and other stakeholders that are consumers of cloud environments. The solution that we are presenting is Cloudify integrated with ServiceNow IT Service Management and ServiceNow's IT Operations Management modules. And what you're going to learn about is how we turn existing investments in cloud infrastructure platforms and cloud orchestration tools into automated environments that provide the opportunity for a seamless and simple self-service management experience for development teams, data scientists, and anybody else who is a consumer of cloud environments, but maybe not an expert in how to manage cloud platforms and orchestration tools. So just a brief intro about Cloudify, just so you're aware of who we are in case anybody watching this is not familiar with Cloudify. What we provide is something we call environment as a service. And it's a technology that allows DevOps teams to automate provisioning services, day two applications, day two workflows, and the ongoing management of hybrid and cloud native, not just infrastructure, but the entire deployment, right? Services that are deployed on there, software that's deployed, the configuration, it's the whole gamut and the entire life cycle of these cloud environments. And Cloudify has been around since 2016, and we have a number of very large enterprises that use our solution in their production environments today across a number of different industries. The solution is environment agnostic, right? So we can work in greenfield environments, we can work in brownfield environments, we work with both on-prem and public cloud services for hosting cloud platforms. The architecture, and we also support Kubernetes, right? We can work in Bluefield environments. So a lot of our customers are working with us to automate the process of how they get their newer workloads operating in containerized deployments, often running in Kubernetes clusters. Our architecture supports any environment operation throughout the entire life cycle. We do integrate, and you'll see this in the demo today, how we integrate with existing orchestration tools. So our philosophy, our strategy is to help companies to use what they are already using and just make it work better, more efficiently, more seamlessly, and more consistently, and in a way that's in compliance with their policies for governance and security, to make sure that they have guardrails in place so that their cloud infrastructure is used in the right way and deployed and managed in the right way. That's not the wild, wild west. And we do have a strategic partnership with ServiceNow, and you'll see that in action in the demo today. Our solution is hosted in ServiceNow's marketplace. It is a solution that we co-developed with engineers from ServiceNow. So this is something that is definitely supported and blessed and contributed to by ServiceNow. So you're going to see the first part of this in the demo, but we want to make you aware of the entirety of our solution for ServiceNow. So the first piece is automatic provisioning of certified cloud environment workflows from IT service management systems, specifically in ServiceNow. It's essentially just making it possible for a user to self-request from ServiceNow's ITSM Service Catalog the creation and provisioning and the ongoing management of cloud environments so that development teams don't have to wait for DevOps resources to become available in order to get what they need to build their application and move it to production, maintain it on an ongoing basis. But Cloudify also provides through our integration with ITOM the ability to automate continuous governance and to ensure policy enforcement of cloud resources. And apparently I made a typo in this slide. The resources may very well be loud, but they are definitely in the cloud. And the idea here is to make sure that things are, depending on which environment they're in, that they are appropriately sized, that unused resources don't continue to get utilized, that tagging is done appropriately, and that complex policy enforcement can be done based on making sure that automated remediation of any violations of policy can be addressed. So that integration is through part of ITOM called Cloud Configuration Governance. It's the part of ITOM that enables the definition and of policy sets, which can then be used in scans that go against public cloud infrastructure. And when policy violations occur, issues can be created, and then there's an opportunity to use ITOM to remediate those issues. Through the integration with Cloudify, those remediation actions can be automated instead of manual. And all that can be done in the single management platform that Cloudify provides. You'll see that in the demo today. It allows for consistency regardless of what action you're taking, regardless of whether the infrastructure was created through ServiceNow, through a CI/CD pipeline, through a manual action, or what have you. Cloudify is able to manage all that centrally, audit it centrally, and make sure that things are done in a consistently and a compliant manner. So why do companies need this solution? Well, what we hear, and I'm sure you guys have probably heard and maybe are experiencing yourselves, 1 out of every 4 developers tells us that they're waiting for some central IT service, a DevOps person, to provide access to the infrastructure that they need in order to build their application or to add new features to their application. So they end up building code locally, and then they want to deploy it in the cloud so they can start to test it out, make sure the features work appropriately, make sure things are configured appropriately. But then when they get to the point where they need infrastructure or services, they have to trigger requests to a DevOps team or an IT operations team and wait for them to become available because they are overworked, and there usually aren't very many people in those groups. They're not at beck and call. So they're waiting. And while they're waiting, time that equals money is slipping away. And they don't have an opportunity to work efficiently. It slows down their ability to get to market faster. It slows down their ability to innovate and be agile. On the business side, there's a huge increase in the cost of cloud services as DevOps is forced to provide access to infrastructure without sufficient controls and without compliance, right? So things get created in the cloud that are larger than they need to be. They're running for longer than they need to be. They're maybe insecure and not configured in a secure manner. The result of all of this is that in 2021, Gartner reported a 65% increase in cloud spending percentage as a percentage of total IT budget, right? So out of the total IT budget, because these cloud resources are very easily requested and created, they grow and grow and grow without really any restriction. And the total budget available on all IT services ends up getting consumed by cloud resources. So this is the business imperative that we're trying to address with the solution between Cloudify and ServiceNow. So what is it that you get through the solution? Well, we provide an automated IT service management environment operations platform, and we also support the remediation of any ITOM cloud policy violations, right? Those are the 2 things that the solution provides. And ultimately, it makes it possible for the DevOps people, the people that are responsible for cloud infrastructure and enforcing compliance policies and making sure that things are done appropriately, they can define blueprints or templates, which can be used to create certified environment blueprints that can then be requested out of ITSM's Service Catalog in order to provision cloud environments that are consistent with the definition defined by your DevOps teams or CloudOps teams, the cloud experts in your organization. Cloudify automates infrastructure requests things like the delivery of an authorized development environment, a testing environment, even a production environment, and to be able to automate that based on the requests that are triggered through the service catalog. Of course, because this is happening inside of ServiceNow ITSM, there's the opportunity to include approval workflows to ensure that cloud operations are authorized in a way that should be authorized by the appropriate people, by the people that actually know what should be created. So, when companies are trying to speed up their agility by giving developers access to the management consoles of public cloud infrastructure, things end up happening in an unauthorized way. So we want to make sure that things are controlled, but then are done with checks and balances, and that the appropriate people are aware of what's going on when requests are made. And companies who are already using ITSM already have workflow processes, approval processes in place, which can be leveraged as part of our solution as well. And then things never stay static, right? There's always change that's occurring. You might need to scale up or down an environment. You might need to change a security policy because the nature of the data in an application has become something that requires more security. What we're trying to do is provide standard pre-approved mechanisms to change these environments without having to require human involvement at runtime to do it. And that's part of the solution as well. So what the architecture looks like and what some of the workflows that we support is represented at a high level on this page. So first of all, you've got our platform, the Cloudify platform on the left, which provides a remote execution and environment management platform, this is the component that we'll use to automate the provisioning and the management of the cloud environments, which we will be creating. And you can see that we can import the templates, playbooks, and other sources of information about cloud environments from existing orchestration tools like CloudFormation, like Terraform, like Azure ARM, configuration tools like Ansible, we integrate with those, and we can even utilize existing Helm charts and use them to automate the management of containerized deployments in Kubernetes. So we integrate directly with these services. We take the existing work that already exists inside of an organization and wrap it and make it possible to be utilized in a controlled automation workflow that's supported by our platform. We also have integrations that work with public and private cloud platforms, which you see at the bottom, and this is where Cloudify will execute the tasks that are required in order to create whatever is defined in the blueprints that are associated with the templates and playbooks and other sources of information at the top. On the right side, you've got ServiceNow's platform, and in particular, IT operations management and IT service management. So for the first scenario, ServiceNow provides a service catalog in ITSM, and a developer could use that to request the creation of a new service, or even the modification of an existing service. And those requests will use our solution that's integrated with ServiceNow, deployable from the ServiceNow marketplace, and reach our API in order to request Cloudify to take care of the provisioning in day 2 scenario. But we know that service management and service catalogs is not the only source of requests for the creation of cloud infrastructure and services. A lot of companies and developers have a desire to use their existing CI/CD pipelines to trigger the creation or the management of the cloud infrastructure. And again, today, without an automation platform like Cloudify, a lot of times what this results in is the creation of a ticket in a service management platform and then waiting for a DevOps person to become available to take care of the request. With our integration, which will happen directly in something like Jenkins or Circle CI, or even integrated directly with your Git repo through Git actions in GitHub as an example, we're able to automate provisioning and day 2 automation through those mechanisms as well through the same API. So at the end of the day, all this stuff is synchronized, right? If you create something from the service catalog initially, but then you want a management from your CI/CD pipeline, it's possible to do it because you've got a centralized platform that's managing the awareness of everything that has been deployed and can manage the changes as well, right? We can manage state files, we can update CMDB in ServiceNow. All that's possible now through this scenario. When it comes to IT operations management, this is a solution that has the opportunity to do discovery and policy scanning of resources that are already deployed in public cloud infrastructures. And today, when that happens, if a policy violation is identified, an issue gets created in an ITOM, and then a cloud management expert or cloud management person needs to take a look at the issue and decide what action needs to be taken to remediate it, and then follow some sort of a manual process in order to like change the hardware type to something that's appropriate, make sure the right tags are assigned and things like that. With our integration, what we allow that cloud management person to do is select a remediation action, which then makes a call via ServiceNow's ITOM platform and our integration with it to our API in order to have Cloudify automate the remediation of that resource and bring it into compliance, and then report back that that issue has been successfully remediated. So we can do all that through our integrations with ServiceNow today. We will be doing a demo for you. Anthony's going to do this in just a second. I have a couple of slides that I do want to present first before we get over to the demo part. We'll come back to it, but you'll see a scenario where a developer is requesting something, but then there's a check and balance by a dev manager, but all the activity that normally would be handled manually by a DevOps team gets managed by us, and you'll hear more about that in just a minute. I do want to talk about a single success story. Our success story is a customer of ours that's a data science division of a large retail organization. They had 6 people in their cloud engineering team, then they could not keep up with the workload that was being provided to them by all the data scientists who need new cloud infrastructure stood up all the time so they can do their analytics. They just couldn't keep up. They needed self-service automated provisioning in order to, that was their plan, was to come up with a self-service automated provisioning mechanism to take the manual workload off their plates. They tried to build it themselves in ServiceNow, and they failed, right? They had some pretty significant challenges trying to do that on their own. They discovered our solution and decided to go forward with that. So some of the main gaps that they were challenged with when they tried to build their self-service platform in ServiceNow on their own was that they had a very heavy number of API calls. They had 5 different APIs, and the creation of any single environment was requiring 9 different calls to those 5 APIs. It was very chatty and very slow as a result. They were using Terraform for their infrastructure as code management, and some of the required APIs that they wanted to use for their cloud environments were not supported by Terraform. And finally, in order to manage the request process and to provision the environments, they ended up they were using Jira to manage all those requests, which is why they wanted to move to ServiceNow and have some automated component to it, but they weren't ever able to get there on their own. So by implementing Cloudify, they automated the entire environment creation process, leveraging their existing Terraform templates, but also including the automation of tasks that were required for those environments that were not supported natively by Terraform. That Terraform didn't work with those APIs. We provide base infrastructure for the creation of shared resources that the data scientists can use. The data scientists can self-request and have automated provisioning of those environments in pretty much a just-in-time and as-needed basis. And everything was these 90 different API calls to 5 different APIs ultimately boil down to a single API call that is exposed by Cloudify's orchestration and environment management platform. So now these 6 engineers can provide higher environments for hundreds of data scientists, and all they're doing is either obviously some troubleshooting, but they actually get to put their energy into higher value work. They can try and be innovative and provide new high valuable services to their customers through the DevOps process and through best practices, things they didn't have time to do before. And the data scientists have a very easy experience, right? Their user experience is very simple, and so they're very, very happy with what it is that they have received out of this change. Okay. So with that, the information, the solution is deployed in ServiceNow's marketplace. If you search for Cloudify in ServiceNow marketplace, you will find it. With an existing Cloudify deployment, it's very easy to install Cloudify for ServiceNow and configure it to work with an existing Cloudify management platform. Happy to talk with you, anybody who's interested in it, more about the specific details about how that occurs, but it's basically, as described in the architecture slide, an independent Cloudify manager, usually running either as a Docker container. It can be deployed in public or private cloud on your own infrastructure if you want. It can also be deployed as a Kubernetes cluster. We have a Helm chart that can be used to do that. And then the installation of our solution in ServiceNow from the marketplace, and then configuration of that component to speak with the Cloudify manager. And all that makes it possible for our customers to accomplish all the use cases that I described already in this discussion. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball over to Anthony to provide the demonstration and talk through the use case scenario that we want to use to try and illustrate for you how an example of how the solution that we're talking about today actually work in a real world environment. All right, go ahead, Anthony. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, just give me 1 second. Let me get my screen shared here. Just let me know, confirm that you can see that and hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. You can see me
right now. It looks like there you go. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks. All right. Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jason. So yeah, I'm Anthony Critelli, Senior Solutions Architect here at Cloudify. And what I'm going to do here is walk you through exactly what Jason said, kind of this initial provisioning demonstration that we have. Jason, can you see this slide okay now that it's full screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks. So I'm going to take you through sort of a day one provisioning scenario and see how we can kind of make some of that self-service capability come to light. And so we're going to work through a very specific scenario. So I'm going to start at the bottom of this diagram. We have a web environment running on AWS, and this is a very simple EC2 instance with supporting infrastructure like VPCs, security groups, networking, all of that. Deployed with Terraform, configured with Ansible to run the Nginx web server. So a very simple, straightforward piece of infrastructure or infrastructure service that a developer might want to deploy, right? They're working on a new web project. They need a web server. And so we're going to work through kind of the workflow that Cloudify enables for that end user. In this case, our software engineer or developer. So we're going to see how they can come into the ServiceNow catalog. They can request what we call a certified environment. So this is an environment we have designed and made available to them with all the guardrails we want to place around that environment. So they can't just log into the AWS console and sort of deploy whatever they want. We'll see how that request gets forwarded over to their manager for approval. And then really kind of the most important piece, we'll see how once that's approved, ServiceNow via our Cloudify integration kicks off the actual deployment and instantiation of that environment and makes that environment available to our end user. And so what I always like to say is like the top half of this diagram, a lot of organizations, have gotten fairly good at, right? The idea of a catalog that people can make requests from, maybe with some governance around what they're allowed to request. But often those requests generate tickets that go to human beings to actually, instantiate that initial infrastructure or deploy that environment. And what we're really enabling here is that full end-to-end flow where, a DevOps or a systems engineering team or an infrastructure team or whatever they are, doesn't have to be intimately involved in that process. They can design the certified environment, make it available via the organization's existing tooling like ServiceNow, and then they can, enable and empower their developers to actually deploy those resources. So that's the scenario we're going to see. I'm also going to take you briefly through the Cloudify platform generally, so you can kind of get a feel for what we offer at Cloudify. So with that out of the way, let me go ahead and just jump to our Cloudify console. So what you're seeing here is a view of the environments, the environment blueprints, as we call them, that we have made available inside of this instance of Cloudify. So everything I do here is I'm going to be doing, of course, via the UI for demo purposes, but the Cloudify platform is API first. So everything I'm doing can be done either via our CLI or via our API directly, via our GitHub Actions, via our ServiceNow integration, all of that. But we're going to just kind of walk through some of the more salient features of the UI first. So you can see here I have a number of environments and items, catalog items that I'm exposing to my user to consume. Now Cloudify is also multi-tenant, so this service catalog that I'm exposing with things like an AWS or a GCP web environment, and this can vary based on which tenant you're logged into. So if I switch tenants, I have a totally different view of different catalog items within that blueprint. And so that's customizable in that regard. The UI itself is also customizable, but we're going to be seeing how we interact through ServiceNow, so I won't spend too much time on that. The only other two things I really want to highlight within Cloudify is first, we have a marketplace of environments and resources that users can deploy to get started with. So if you start using the Cloudify platform and you want to start slowly, say I want users to be able to deploy EC2 instances using Cloudify, we have blueprints available in our community marketplace for that. And we have examples for all the major clouds, as well as some generic Terraform and Helm examples as well. And then Jason touched on this, but we also have the ability to automatically generate our blueprints via existing Terraform modules. So you can point Cloudify at an existing Terraform module, and Cloudify can automatically scaffold out our blueprint, as we call it, for that module. So you can take a Terraform module that your organization already has, and you don't have to get rid of it or anything like that. You can immediately take that module and make it available in a reusable way to your end users by importing it into Cloudify. And our new 6.4 version of Cloudify has some really exciting features in this regard. So we're going to do automatic input and output detection and things like that. So very powerful way to just take some of the existing code that organizations tend to already be using and expose that within the Cloudify Service Catalog. But to drill into the actual demo I want to provide, I'm going to pull up this AWS web environment catalog item here. You can see I can see all the deployments of this environment. I currently have one deployment stood up of that EC2 instance that's deployed via Terraform. And what we're going to see is how that workflow works through ServiceNow. So real quick, we can see Jason mentioned we are a certified app in the ServiceNow store. So you can request the app right through the traditional ServiceNow channels. It's obviously been vetted and gone through the certified app process. But I'm going to come into my service catalog here, right? This is an interface that's going to be familiar to most folks who use ServiceNow. You can see I'm logged in as a generic user here, Abe Lincoln, and I've got some catalog items available to me. Now, our Cloudify app for ServiceNow fundamentally just exposes a number of things that you can use within the ServiceNow Flow Designer. So I've designed a catalog item here called AWS Web Environment, and that's going to be tailored to deploying this particular web environment. But we also include some generic catalog items that have some flows that do cool things. Like if I pull up my ServiceNow environment and I try to select a certified environment, what you'll notice here is that this drop-down menu is automatically populated all of the blueprints that exist in that ServiceNow instance. And so if I just pick one, I can select I can select an environment, and I can automatically start using one of the existing environments that already exist, and it'll automatically populate the inputs that I expose to that user also to fill in. So we have the ability to do generic kind of pull down all of the items in ServiceNow and expose them. But we also have the ability to create more tailored catalog items, which is what we're going to look at here. So I got my AWS web environment, some web infrastructure running on AWS, and I'll just provide some inputs. So this is going to be what we call the project, which is just the Cloudify manager, the tenant that you're using. We'll give our deployment a name. I'll call it Demo Now QA. And then you can see I put some guardrails around what inputs my user is allowed to provide to this deployment. So I've got different regions. So I'm scoping this deployment down to specific regions, right? I'm not giving the user the ability to deploy in any region they want to. And I'm going to deploy this in US West 1. And then I also have some a question like an environment type. So we have a dev, production, and QA environment type. And what these actually correlate to on the back end within Cloudify, the way we've defined this environment blueprint, these correlate to instance sizes. So production is obviously going to be the largest instance size. I think it's a T3 large, and dev is going to be the smallest, say at T3 small, and then a T3 medium for QA. And so we can expose the user experience for that developer is really more tailored to what their needs are, right? We're not asking them for a bunch of technical information that they may or may not know how to provide, or they may have to think about too hard, right? We can tailor kind of the questioning to questions that are relevant to their use case, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit this request, and we're going to keep an eye on the right-hand side. You'll see nothing has happened in the Cloudify manager yet, and that's because this has not yet been approved by this user's manager. You can see that the request itself is waiting for manager approval. So I'm going to log back in as that user's manager here. And if I refresh my catalog, you can see I have an approval waiting for me here in the ServiceNow approval list. And so I'm going to pull that up. And what we can see is I can look at this this request. I can see who requested it. I can see all of the information they provided. So what region they'd like to deploy this into, what environment type they're requesting, and all that information. And then I can obviously approve or reject it. And I'm going to approve it, of course. And what we'll see here now is our integration is going to kick off the instantiation of this environment. And you can see it just popped up over here on the right. So now our integration with ServiceNow is now asking Cloudify to deploy a new instance of this environment. And so I'll pull this up. And so if I'm a developer, I never really have to leave the convenience of the left-hand side of the screen, right? I can stay within ServiceNow, and you'll see how at the end of this deployment, we'll get back some parameters that we expose back to that developer so they can start consuming that environment. But if I'm a systems engineering team, a DevOps team, whatever that team might be within your organization, I have all this information on the right-hand side. It's coming from Cloudify, so I can do more advanced debugging and have a better view into the more technical aspects of the environment. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So pulling up this particular environment's deployment, one of the first things I can see here is what we call our execution task graph. And this is a representation of all of the tasks and their relationships between those tasks that are necessary to instantiate this environment. So you can see here the task that's currently running is a Terraform apply. So what Cloudify is doing is I have a Terraform module behind the scenes here for this environment, and Cloudify is running an apply using the code provided in that Terraform module. Obviously, I need to instantiate all of the infrastructure resources with Terraform before I can run my Ansible playbook, which is the next larger rectangle here in this overall graph. So we're able to visualize where in the process of deploying our environment Cloudify is. And really crucially here, we can filter on logs for any given task, but we can also resume these tasks if they fail. So you can imagine a situation where maybe my IAM role for my Cloudify manager, I didn't give it sufficient permissions to deploy a certain resource, right? So the Terraform apply step, maybe it fails. And so what I can do is I can go, that task would fail, this Terraform apply would fail. I can rectify that problem. I can come back and then I can tell Cloudify to just resume this workflow from the point of failure. So I don't have to throw out the entire environment. I don't get stuck in some kind of weird half deployed state that I can't get out of. We can always resume these workflows from their general point of failure. And so you can see here I have logs streaming in from the Terraform apply. These are also consumable via the CLI, which is usually my preferred method. And then we have all kinds of rich information generally about this deployment. So if I head over to the deployment info tab, I can scroll down and pull up things like information about the Terraform module, and I can get information about this Terraform module that's been deployed, and things like that. So my more technical user who is more likely to need to do advanced troubleshooting or debugging on this environment, they have these kinds of things accessible to them directly. They can come in the Cloudify and get this information and execute custom workflows and things like that against the environment. So you might have a workflow, for example, that runs server patching or things like that. And that might be relevant for our more technical users, right? But less relevant for my developer who at the end of the day just wants a web environment that they can consume. So it's going to take a couple of minutes to run. What I would just like to do while that's running is pull up, kind of give you an idea of what an environment will look like after it's already been deployed. And so if I come into my requests here, I have to switch back to my my regular user here. Let me just switch users. I'll refresh this real quick. And you can see I have the open request that's currently being fulfilled by ServiceNow and Cloudify. But if I come into my closed request here, I can see about an hour ago I deployed a new web environment. I can expand this request. And you can see I have information that Cloudify has commented back into this request for me. So I have information like a web endpoint that I can use, that I can grab. I can plug that endpoint into a browser. I can see that the web server has been successfully deployed, right? I have a temporary SSH key that we automatically generated for this deployment. I have a user that I can use to SSH to this machine with. So I'm exposing certain things back to my end user. And that information I'm giving back to them is what's relevant to their use case, right? So the web developer doesn't care about something like, the Terraform plan output. They don't care about, the VPC ID or something like that. What they really care about are, the things that enable them to do their job, right? So, the endpoint for the environment they're deploying, maybe some authentication information and things like that. And we have the ability to expose only that relevant information back to that user. And as you can see, that information is also available in the deployment info tab within Cloudify itself as well. But my developer never has to leave the comfort of the ServiceNow portal if that's, the UI I'm putting in front of them. And then as Jason alluded to, for a technical team, they might come in here and deploy using ServiceNow, but then maybe they want to run updates or other workflows using GitHub Actions and a CI/CD system. With Cloudify, you can do that because Cloudify is in the middle mediating these interactions, keeping track of the state of the environment, and kind of acting as that central executor. So if the developer wants to request that environment, and then from here on out they want all the updates to that environment to occur as part of a CI/CD pipeline, we can maintain that consistency using Cloudify in between. And so, Jason, I'm going to turn back to you because that's kind of the overview of an initial day one provisioning workflow with ServiceNow. So thanks. Back to you, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Great demo. Yeah, just a couple of things to note. I kind of alluded to it, but I want to make sure it's clear. Because Cloudify is orchestrating all these things and acting as a management platform between the cloud platforms, the orchestration tools, exposing the services via ITOM and via ITSM and via CI/CD pipelines. Everything is consistent, right? We're keeping track of the state of whatever's deployed, whether we're doing it through native API calls directly to the cloud platforms or using orchestration tools like Terraform and Ansible. We're aware of that. We can also do things like update the CMDB in a ServiceNow environment so that if there are other workflows and other actions that a ServiceNow user wants to leverage the CMDB for, they have the opportunity to do that as well and have confidence that what's in the CMDB actually matches what's truly deployed in their cloud platforms. So it's a really rich featured solution that kind of accounts for all these various scenarios, which our customers have talked to us about their attempts to try and build their own self-service request processes in ServiceNow independent of a platform like ours. They all struggle with it. Right? They can get the workflow process down for like one application, but it doesn't really lend itself to doing multiple applications, or maybe it works well for infrastructure, but it doesn't work well for configuration or code deployment. Maybe it doesn't work well for day two operations, right? It does a great job of provisioning things, but then doesn't really help them when they have to change things on an ongoing basis. So that's really the key to what it is that we're providing. We currently have the use cases, some you saw in Anthony's demo, some I talked about when I was introducing our integration with ITOM, but of course there's a roadmap of additional features that we're working with ServiceNow to include in our solution for ServiceNow to continue to provide value. Some of those things revolve around stuff like cost estimations, right? And including the view of what the cost of a deployment might be and using that as part of approval processes. For example, you got a budget, your team is over budget, you try to self-service request something, maybe you're denied or have to get manager approval before that actually occurs. The last thing I want to mention is, the scenario I talked about with IT operations management and cloud configuration governance policy enforcement is kind of a reactive thing I was talking about, where we're looking at existing resources that already are there in the public cloud and making sure that they're in compliance with our policies. But even in a scenario like the one that Anthony demoed, right, where it's just a self-service request that's being automatically provisioned, ITOM policies can be triggered and evaluated there as well. So we can make sure that appropriate tags are applied, so that we can make sure that whatever was defined in the certified environment blueprint actually continues to apply to the cloud resources that have been provisioned, right? So it's an ongoing process, and it doesn't have to be reactive. It can be done proactively as well, and then it needs to be done on a continuous basis to make sure that policy compliance is maintained going forward. So and that kind of wraps up our presentation. We're happy to take any questions that the audience may have.
Thanks, Jason and Anthony. If anybody's got any questions, come off mute, please. Please don't hesitate to ask. If you can't get off of mute and you want to drop it in the chat, that's okay as well. And it doesn't look like there's anything there, so that's okay as well. We'll give everybody 15 minutes back. Thanks again to the Cloudify team for presenting today and showing your solution off and just exposing the broader community to this. If anybody has any questions or wants to pick up this recording after the fact, the recordings are available on the WWT community that hosts the Infrastructure and Programmability Meetup group. And that link will be added. I'll drop it in the chat for the meetup as well. And it's also out there on the meetup site for the network. But if you have anything that you need, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks to everybody else, and have a great day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks for
everybody.
having us.